But now with the ballot verifier, you can go on and actually look at every single ballot image in every contest. You can narrow it down to vote channels by absentee, early voting, election day, get a feel for the voter behavior of those that show up and vote in those particular vote channels. And then you can break it down by party as well.
Trent, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Great. I'm super pumped about this. You are the Ada County Clerk. We're talking about elections. I've had these lingering questions about elections in Idaho since I moved here, because it seems that everyone talks about being conservative. Everybody talks about being Republican. Everybody talks about being a rhino, which is a Republican in name only. So like you're Republican, but you're not like a real Republican. And recently in an interview with somebody, the gentleman said, hey, look, most people, like, there are a lot of crossover fake Republicans. I was like, what does that mean? He's like, well, they're not real Republicans. And I said, okay, I'm an idiot. What does that mean? And he says, that means that if you're a real Republican, you need to support the platform. So only real Republicans are the ones that are supporting the platform. And fake Republicans or rhinos are people that, crossover vote or vote for something that's not classically conservative. And like, they're not real Republicans. So this gentleman was saying, look, if you're a real Republican, you have to support every piece of the Republican platform and everybody who's running as a Republican. And I thought that was very curious, because I don't have any comment on like who's a real Republican, but I really try to be a thoughtful, reasonable person. And after talking to you last time, one of the clips that I've loved from our original conversation was how you said it's so fascinating to see how people actually function. And this was obviously brought into national attention in 2016 when, Hillary Clinton was winning in polls, and what people were saying they would do totally flew in the face of what they actually did. And you, with ballot verifier for Ada County, that anybody can go and check out, you can pierce through the veil. You can see how people are actually working. You don't see who they are, but you see what they're doing. Talk to me about this. I love it.
Yeah, it's a window that we've never had before for the public. We've obviously seen as election administrators, we can see the images as they're being tabulated. We can get a sense of this, right? But now with the ballot verifier, you can go on and actually look at every single ballot image in every contest. You can narrow it down to vote channels by absentee, early voting, election day, get a feel for the voter behavior of those that show up and vote in those particular vote channels. And then you can break it down by party as well. And it's pretty easy to see that in a primary election. You're only voting for Republicans when you get a Republican ballot, right? But
Sure.
When in the November election, you got everybody on the ballot that made it through the primary. And so what we did is we took some time this last couple of weeks to look at this, and this just came out yesterday for us, and so we're still digesting it. But as you can see on the screen, we analyzed if you voted for Republican, right? Did you vote for all Republicans, or did you vote for all Democrats, or was there a mix between the ballots images, right? And as what we found is that in the last 2022 general election, 24% of people who voted for Republicans voted straight Republican tickets. 19% voted straight Democrat. That means that only 43% between those two combined voted straight party tickets on a general election. That's 57% of the population in Ada County had some mix of Republican or Democrat on their general ballot. So it's pretty easy to see that there's quite a few people out there that are picking between candidates, not necessarily just parties.
This is so incredible. Okay, what portion of voters are registered Republicans in Ada County?
Oh, you're going to throw me on the spot here. Nicole, do you know? I'll get that here in a second.
Okay.
She'll look it up.
It's fine. Because if you're saying, look, only 24% of all voters vote straight party line, even if you said, hey, the actual number is like the number of registered Republicans in Ada County is like, let's say 48%. It's under 50% of people, but like, almost the majority.
Yeah.
That literally means, and if that's the case, then that would mean that only half of Republicans by other people's definition are like real Republicans, right? Because you just don't have that party loyalty or you don't have the deep contemplation that in that assertion of the definition of like a real Republican. That doesn't factor in the deep contemplation and homework and research and nuance that people bring to actual voting.
That's correct.
God, this is great. Okay, so you have 57% of people that are crossing over, and I don't want to say crossing over, but mixing them because you can't.
Ballots.
And again, to be clear, in a primary, you can see who is a registered Republican, who's a registered Democrat, just by the nature of our primary system. But in a general election, you don't have the capacity to say, okay, these people were crossover. All you know is, hey, 24% of people voted straight R all the way down. Now, this also doesn't factor into, or does it factor into people that, okay, not just voting R straight up or down, but say somebody votes R all the way down. They're a monolithic voter. They voted all Republican. Fine. This doesn't factor into how they address things like bonds or levies or whatnot.
It's
correct?
difficult for us to analyze that again because what we're looking at is the cast vote record, and on a multiple page ballot, which is what most general elections are. You don't just have one page. A voter will get 2 pages. So generally on the first page, front and back of that first page, you're going to have all the candidates and offices. And then on the third page or the second page where the third thing you can vote on is all the bonds, ballot questions, those types of things. So it's hard to marry up the voter behavior of the first page with the second page because we don't track that. There's no way for me to tie a second page to a first page, if that makes sense, because we're just capturing those images. We're not trying to track if the first page is tied with the second page.
So it's possible that there's even more, there are even fewer people than 24 that theoretically blindly, I don't want to say blindly, but like overwhelmingly or unanimously support the platform. Because if somebody says, hey, if the platform is saying, let's do a fictitious example, the GOP platform right now is saying defund all higher education, and you have a bond or a levy or something to fund higher education. It's possible that in that 24% of people that voted R all the way down, you would have some people, at least I have to believe the number would be a non-zero number, right? Some number of people that actually voted in favor of funding higher education. Like I consider myself whatever it is, but I definitely I like higher education. That's where I went into college as a math major and I switched to rhetoric to learn how to communicate better. Surprise. And that's a really valuable thing to me. Now, is all college valuable? Is every single major in college valuable? I think we could have a very robust and clear conversation about that. But I don't think throwing the baby out with the bathwater would necessarily be a great idea. Do colleges need revision? Yeah. Should we change student debt formulas? Yes. Should they be the most secure debt that the world has ever known? No, they should not be. But that's another day. So back to this. What are other things you've seen? So the big shock, at least to me in ingesting this, is, okay, look, you have less than half of the people are actual monolithic voters. Over half of the voting population that actually comes in and votes, they mix over back and forth. What are other things people can see with a ballot verifier?
Well, the other one is this. You can also, on this front page, we haven't put this out to the public yet. It will be eventually, so they can use this data as well. But we've got it broken down by district and by vote channel. So you can see, those that vote by absentee, how many of them are monolithic, right? Those that vote early and those that vote on election day.
What is that breakdown, by the way?
So you can see on the right-hand side for everybody that voted in the 2022 election, Republicans, 18% voted all Republican on absentee ballots, whereas 27% of the Democrats did. Early voting, you flip those. So Republicans in early voting in person, 26%, and Democrats, 16%. And then on election day, 28% voted straight Republican and 18% voted straight Democrat.
I think you reverse those last two. It's election day voting is the 26% Republican.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
In-person early voting. Okay. So if you're an in-person early voting Republican, you're much more likely to be a monolithic straight ticket R all the way down than if you're an absentee ballot Republican.
Yeah.
Why? What? You also have a 10% swing from an absentee Democrat, which is 26.7% monolithic, down to a 16.1% monolithic on election day.
There was a narrative going around in the last several years that in other states, Democrats vote by absentee and Republicans vote in person on election day. And that got repeated several times in many different channels of different political spheres. And so there's a perception that if you're a true Republican, you show up on election day and vote in your precinct. If you're a true Democrat, you would vote absentee. That doesn't play out here in Idaho. In fact, this last election that we just had, more registered Republicans voted by absentee than registered Democrats. And it's just not a thing here in Idaho. Those that vote absentee, we have them across the board, as you can see. But it does lean a little bit more towards the left liberal side of straight Democrat voters that request absentees and cast them.
Right. Do you think that the definition that's like if you're a real Republican, you're going to show up day of, right? Do you think that plays into the swing in I mean, obviously you go from 18 to 26%.
Yeah.
So this is what I find very interesting. It's people are defining these terms and then affecting individuals' behaviors, which is so wild to me, right? Just like I started with, like people are defining a true, quote, real Republican or true Republican as somebody who must be a monolithic voter.
Right.
And like, I would like to think that people don't care about that, but I think there is an aspect of, okay, if that's the real definition and I want to be a real Republican, especially somebody like, for me, moving from out of state, it's very difficult. Like if you're conservative in California, there are very, very few of us, right? And you definitely keep to yourself. And then you move to a state like this, it's like, well, there's a wide range of conservatism. It's not just, okay, this is the only person who's a real Republican. It's like, no, you can be a real conservative and want to fund public education. Like, or you can be a real conservative and you want more people to do homeschooling. Like both of those people can be real Republicans. It just depends on what lens you're looking at these principles through.
There's a massive demographic shifts as you go throughout the voting population, right? You've got young families with kids in school, right? They may be very socially conservative, very fiscally conservative, but they want good schools for their kids, right? They don't have options to send their kids to multiple different places. So public school is it for a lot of these families, right? So they're probably going to go, you know what? I'd like my kids to be in good schools, to have good facilities to go to and good teachers, good funded teachers. I'm going to vote for a bond, right? Then you got like my mother who lives in Star, one of the most conservative, fiscally conservative women I've ever met, right? She's on a fixed income, right? Social Security, retirement. Her income doesn't grow as prices go up, right? But she recognized the fact that there wasn't enough fire support from the local area to, if her house catches on fire, that someone's going to come put it out. Right. So she's happy to vote for a fire bond to make sure that her assets that she's spent a lifetime building up and paying for, right, are protected. And so she voted for the fire bond, which kind of blew me away. But people think differently as they go through life, and then when they're in different phases of life, and they're going to vote for different things that matter to them, right?
Right. Man, how wild! And again, what you're articulating is a functional, pragmatically oriented voter base.
Yeah. You saw it with the fight over the libraries, right? A lot of people that are very socially conservative want to make sure that what's in the libraries are appropriate and valid. 100% agree with it, right? But then there was a smaller faction that was like, if they're not going to, police it as well as I want them to police it, we're going to get rid of libraries. Well, you got a lot of families out there that would really like to have libraries around, whether they have everything perfectly in them or not, right? And so you're going to have some Republicans who are socially conservative that still go, you know what, I'd like them to fix that problem in the library, right? But I also like libraries, so I want them to stick around.
Right.
And so I'm going to vote for bonds. I'm going to vote for the right people to be on library boards, and hopefully we can fix the problem that way rather than wiping them off the planet. So
yeah, the push towards monolithic voting, to kind of like you're pointing out, I think it really betrays the principal conflict that people really have to engage in, which is like, damn it, okay, look, I don't want to pay more money for like emergency services, but I also don't want my house to burn down. So like, how do I vote for limited government and lower budget, but also vote to like keep my house safe, right? Like, how do you vote to have a library cleaned up or be reflective of your values and what you want it to be, but also like keep the library open?
Yeah.
Right. Like, these are really, like, there's no right solution. And it's cool to see people grappling with this because, again, like I always think the world is infinitely complex. And it's like, that's one of the reasons why I was talking to somebody recently and they're like, well, you know, honestly, I don't know your opinion, like from your podcast, like I don't know your opinion or your position on things. It's like, you want to know why? Because I'm an idiot. And no matter what, every time I think I have a good idea, even if I keep it to myself, I always hear from somebody else, right? Because that's my big push. Like so I hear from other people. I'm like, damn it, I didn't even think about that. And it's impossible for me to have confidence in my answer. And even if I feel like I have a good answer when I talk to both people, it's like, okay, is that good for now? Or is that good for a year or 4 from now? It's like, oh, shoot. I suppose if you push that out 4 years, that's not a very good idea, right? So like, it's too hard.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see that people are also struggling with this. You keep all the voter information anonymous, right? Like, just because you can find it, but you could see like actual ballots and whatnot, correct?
Yeah. You can see all the ballots that were cast.
Is there a way for me to look up my own ballot? Like if I have a voter ID or a number or something?
There is nothing officially that ties your ballot to you that you can see on the ballot. We handle that through the registration and issuing process, right? I check who you are, make sure you are who you are, and then I give you the correct ballot. Once that ballot comes back to me, there's no way for me to tie that ballot to you. It's just your vote, and that's protecting your privacy, which is a constitutional mandate here in Idaho for voter privacy. You have the right to a secret ballot. So once that ballot is cast, all the security measures and process that we go through to make sure that ballot custody was correct from the time I identified you as the registered voter and got you that ballot, ensure that I can have a secret ballot at the very end, which means nobody knows that it's your ballot, right? Now, you could write something on your ballot that only you would know and go look it up now on the ballot verifier if that's what you wanted to do, because it's out there now. And I'm not redacting any information on a ballot. So there would be a way, but you should be careful on how you mark that to personally identify it as yours, because maybe someone else might be able to go, oh, I know whose ballot that is.
I have a friend who sent me a picture of his ballot and he had signed it with his initials, like a real big, and you don't know what his name was.
Yeah.
So he had to go looking for that big swirly like initial. Man, and he found it and everything was perfect. He was like, this is wild. This is literally my ballot. He was like, please don't share this with people. So he had to sift through, and I suppose you can go through like precincts and a bunch of other things, right?
Yeah, you can narrow it down. You're not going to have to go through 240,000 ballots.
Okay.
We, with the ballot verifier, allow you to sort down by precinct and by vote channel. So if you voted on election day and you know your precinct, you sort by that, and there's at least 1,000 ballots probably that you would have to go through to find.
Just like refreshed a bunch of times until he saw his dumb signature thing.
But I would not recommend anybody signing their ballots, because then you are forfeiting your right to a secure private ballot. If you want to put like a serial number of a $2 bill that only you have in your pocket on your ballot, then fine.
How did you come up with that?
Trust me, I've heard every possible way to try to keep things secure.
Man, my 10-year-old's obsessed with the $2 bills right now. He wants to go down to every bank and get like and I'm like, listen, man, I don't even know where the banks are anymore. Like, when's the last time you went to a teller? I think the last time I went was like 2018.
I haven't gone to a bank in probably 20 years.
Yeah, last time I went was I think I had to get like a cashier's check, and that's before I realized I could just wire money effortlessly offline. And I'm, it's a thing.
Here's another fascinating thing on this. So if you look at the results, there's another page here. This is showing you of the people that voted straight Republican, right? What else did they vote for, or what did they vote for? And what caught our attention on this is, so you can see all the Republican candidates on the right side. If there was an undervote or a write-in, that wasn't counted. So we didn't count that against someone if they didn't vote at all for something.
Sure.
But if you get down to the nonpartisan races, this is highway district and CWI.
Okay, wait. Okay, so this is the habit of the monolithic voter.
Well, this is interesting, right? So this person or these people that voted straight, all Republicans, right? 60%, 40 to 60% undervoted, did not vote in these races because these were not identified as partisan races. These are nonpartisan races. So because there wasn't an R or a D next to them, they didn't vote, right?
Wow.
And these are the highway districts and
so you have
College
district
of Western Idaho.
District Zone 3, Mary May.
Yeah.
And then you have the second highest vote was the undervote.
Yeah.
Wow.
But it's just amazing to me how many undervoted on these particular
So College
races.
of Western Idaho,
Mm-hmm.
Zone 2, 4-year term, more people didn't vote for somebody or they wrote it in than they voted for the person who won.
Yes.
That's wild. And again, this is just for people who voted R all the way down.
All the way down. And then you can kind of sort it. And these are the people that mostly voted Republican, and you can see who else was voted for on these particular ones, and all the way down to someone who voted 0% Republican, to see who else they voted for.
Can you go back to the 80 to 99?
Yeah.
That mostly Republican? So the mostly Republican really liked Ammon Bundy. They're
Ammon Bundy
fan.
and Scott Cleveland.
Scott Cleveland.
Yeah.
Where's that?
The United States Senator.
Oh, there he is at the top. Holy cow, man. Okay, so for the mostly Republican people, that looks like 37,431 ballots.
Yeah.
They almost went for Ammon Bundy for governor.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, man, that's wild.
And then we also have this ability to go to head to head. So for governor, if you voted for Brad Little, who else did you vote for? Right. And you can see comparisons on the right and left hand side all the way down. And you can sort these.
Wait, you're moving too. You got to let me orient myself here, buddy. Okay, so if you voted for Brad Little,
yeah,
then David Roth voted for Brad Little. Didn't vote. Oh, so if you didn't vote for Brad Little, David Roth was way up there.
Yes,
that's the left versus the right.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Good Lord, man. Okay, so Russ Fulcher and Kaylee Peterson. If you voted for Brad Little, Kaylee Peterson only got like just under 20% of the vote. But if you didn't vote for Brad Little, she won that vote.
Yeah. So in other words, if you voted for Brad Little, 20% of the people that voted for Brad Little also voted for Kaylee Peterson.
But more people voted. If you didn't vote for Brad Little, that's the right-hand column.
Yeah, right-hand column.
More people voted for Kaylee Peterson than Russ Fulcher.
Yes.
Holy cow, man. What a cool data set. And this, again, you articulated, this does not show things like bonds and whatnot beneath
this
it,
doesn't,
correct?
because I can't tie those two pages together.
Gotcha. Oh, man. So Sean Keenan, Phil McGrain. If you didn't vote for Brad Little, you really liked Sean Keenan.
Yeah.
Instead of Phil McGrain.
But you can also see if you didn't vote for Brad Little, close to 40% still voted for Phil McGrain.
So does that articulate that somebody's more of a moderate? Like what's the implication of this information?
You can imply probably a lot of things, but you can see there's certain candidates that fare better across the political spectrum than others do. So that's one of the things you can definitely zero in on.
Because you see the Mike Simpson and Wendy, Representative Congress 2nd District, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you voted for Brad Little, you're definitely a Mike Simpson guy.
Yeah.
But if you didn't vote for Brad Little, you're definitely a Wendy guy or gal, whoever you are. Man, that's
Anyway.
interesting. Can you do it by age?
We can't because again, nothing on the
Nothing on
ballot
the
ties it to any demographic, any personal information. I don't know the age, gender, anything like that.
Have you shown this to like a lot of political consultants, or have you talked to people who track votes and have certain opinions about crossover votes or voter behavior? Because this is one of the first systems that has ever existed, at least in Idaho, that you have compiled this data so it's anonymous and you can find out these connections, right?
Yeah, I haven't talked to anybody about this level of analysis. We just did this internally just to see for ourselves because we kept getting that question like, well, so how do voters behave? And we're like, well, I mean, we'll spend a little bit of time analyzing that, but my job is really to make sure that you have the ability to vote and that it's counted properly, right? Not all the other stuff that kind of goes along with it. There's more leaning towards campaigns and candidates and that kind of information. They take the information I have and they can run with it. What would be really cool, I think, in the future is if someone used it. This would be an appropriate way to use AI, right? Here's copious amounts of data, all these images that I have, and throw AI at it and say, you know, can you describe voter behavior based off these things? And it could probably do it much easier than what we did over the last couple of weeks, trying to just manually pull all this information in and sort it in a way that can be seen.
Man, this is, again, I think it's so cool that you guys can do this. Now, as far as the ballot verifier, can you pull up, like, because this is information drawn from the ballot verifier, right?
This is from the ballot verifier.
Okay, but the actual, could you pull up the ballot verifier so we can see, like, go, I know we're not going to be able to find my ballot.
Here's the ballot verifier here. So you can go in and you pick an election. What do you want to look at? Something you voted in.
Okay, the primary.
The primary. So the last primary,
yeah, right.
May 2024.
Perfect.
Okay, so this is the May 2024 primary. Now what do you want to look at?
Let's do United States Representative, Congressional District.
Fulcher. Let's pick one that Congressional District 2, Simpson, Cleveland, Higgins. Okay. So we'll go into here. This is the Republican primary. These are the people that were on the ballot. Mike Simpson, Scott Cleveland, and Sean Higgins. That's the percentages. What you can see is if we went back to that front page, there's a little blue check shield down in the bottom of the square there. That means Severa, the company that we throw the data over to, has actually done their independent analysis, and they have verified that this matches our official results that we put out on election night. So they've done their own analysis. It's an audit, essentially, of our work, right? But if you wanted to go in and audit it yourself, you could go into this level detail, and it breaks it down by precinct. So the charts below here show you all of the precincts, and the color coding is in the precinct, which one of these people on the ballot actually won that precinct, right? So you can see
precinct 1416, Scott Cleveland nailed that one.
Scott Cleveland won that, 34 to 26, right? And you can go down and see all of that. You can also break this even further out by vote type, and it'll show you absentee, election day, and early voting for each one of those vote channels for all the different candidates for every single precinct we have here. But now this is where you get into the verification, right? So you have there's 19,000 ballots, 19,007, I shouldn't say ballots, cast vote records that had this contest on it, right? And you can look at every single one of those images. If you wanted to filter it even further, you could go 1416, right? I want to look at 1416, and I only want to look at early voting.
And that's the filter in the top right.
Yep. And so now there's 17 cast vote records.
This is probably how my friend found his vote.
So then you can go in and you can look at the actual image here, and it'll pop up. And that's one of those 19 images, right? That's on the right-hand side. And it takes a second for the second side to come up, I think. I'm on the Wi-Fi network here. Yeah, but if the connection was good enough here, I could pull up the left-hand side, the cast vote record, which is how the machine actually read the image on the right-hand side.
It's good. It's good. But the bottom line is you can confirm the right side, which is the actual image of the ballot. to the left side, which is what the machine said it was counted as.
Yeah.
And so you can do an individual audit of every single one and say like, hey, look, this is what we're dealing with.
Exactly.
How many people do that? Because it was my understanding that you'd have like auditors come in very regularly watching elections and, making sure, seeing through the windows, watching everything going on. Did you have a lot of people that you're able to then just send this to once you got it? You're like, hey, here, audit away.
Yeah, no, we've got a lot of people. Now that it's out there, I don't know who's looking at it necessarily and how much they're using it, but there are some people that are digging very deeply into it because we get a lot of questions. But we do get audited independent of this ballot verifier as well. The Secretary of State comes in and audits us post-election and says, hey, did you do things right? And they do a hand count compared to our vote count and then do a scan recount and match it all up and go, did the results match what we saw when we came in and audited? So we have that audit as well. But this is now a citizen's audit, right? On top of the third-party independent audit that Severa does of us, right? It's very nerve-wracking to take everything that we did, right, and throw it over the fence and go, all right, tell us what we did wrong, and have them to go through every single ballot that we had and analyze it and put it up there and say, yep, those match what you said were posted on election night. It will not be it's a good day every time we throw that over and it matches. So.
Gosh, man, that's a lot. Now, how many, when the Secretary of State comes in, they're not auditing 17,000 ballots, right?
No,
do they take like a random sampling?
It's a random sampling.
And then they just make sure, hey, look, you guys did everything correctly.
Yeah. They like grab that box of ballots, that box of ballots, and then they go, this is what you said was in these ballots. Now we're going to check them to make sure that you're actually correct. And they check to make sure that the machines did it correctly because they're doing a portion of it that's hand counted.
We'll have to do a longer, because I know this is a longer conversation. We'll have to do a longer conversation on the chain of custody of votes. Mm-hmm. But in general, is that when people come in to Ada County elections and they're worried about votes being accurate, are they worried that they got manipulated in the chain of custody, or are they? I would presume, but correct me if I'm wrong, I would presume that they're not coming in saying, hey, you made a mistake here and I have this evidence. It's more, I would think that it's more anxiety about the possibility of that manipulation. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think it all boils down to people are fearing that their vote is somehow either not counted correctly or it's diluted by allowing people that shouldn't be voting to vote, right? That's the stem, that's the fear of what people are worried about. So, we're constantly answering questions about, voter registration rolls, right? Who's on there? Are they allowed to vote? Are they living in the right place? Are they citizens? All that kind of stuff, right? So we field a lot of those questions. And then we also field a lot of questions about, well, did the machines do their job, right? We test the machines, you don't even know how many times, right? And we leave that open to the public as well. There's actually a public logic and accuracy test, which the public wants to. They can come in and watch us test the machines. And we mark all these ballots and then we put them through the machine and we know what they should say. And if they do something different, then there's a problem, right? So we test the machines ad nauseum, right? And then the ballot custody is something that we pay a lot of attention to. It's easy for someone to come in and say, well, this one thing could go wrong, right? Well, yeah, there's a possibility, a very small possibility that could go wrong. But the fact that it's one of multiple steps means that it's nearly impossible for that whole thing to get to the end game and have an influence on the election, right? We have things that happen, right? I have a father and son that live together, same address, exact same name. They can come in and one might even grab the wrong ID, right? And scan it. And all of a sudden now we've got, the same, what appears to be the same individual, registered, both of them are registered. And then the other one comes in with the same ID because he pulled the right ID when he came to vote and pop, there's small little things like that, right? But we catch those things because we have multiple layers of security in place, right? And same with absentees. Your absentee comes in, it's not just sitting around that anybody can go and touch it and manipulate it and do something nefarious to it, right? They're locked away in cages. There's dual custody requirements to even get near these ballots. The process that we go through is under a lock and key. It's also under on camera surveillance. We
And
have
I'm sorry to interrupt. Is the camera surveillance accessible? Like if I wanted to watch everything?
You could watch everything online around election time. We don't have there's several cameras that we have going year round. There's many more cameras that we have up and running during the election time. We also have cameras on all our ballot boxes, right? We know who's approaching them, what they're dropping in them. There's just lots of security measures, right? So between us verifying multiple ways who you are, right? Making sure that you get the ballot is in a controlled environment on election day. It's your ballot under absentee process is locked away, guarded very precisely. We process those things. We validate and verify signatures, all those things. It's really hard for me to see any possible way. And trust me, I've been doing this for many, many years, right? And I served in the military for 20 years. If I thought there was something that could possibly go wrong, I would address it. And if something did go wrong, I would fix it, right? We're looking at these things very closely. There's nothing more important than me protecting the sanctity of the vote, right? Your vote, your voice matters more than anything else to me. Right. And I want to make sure it's heard and it's heard properly and it's counted properly. So we're doing everything that we can to make sure that that process is sound. It's been shot at 1,000 different ways to see if there's weaknesses in this process. We've buttoned up a lot of things over the last several years. People should have trust when they come and vote, no matter how they vote, that it's getting counted properly and that it's getting reported properly. Now, is there an opportunity for someone with a mega computer to like intercept when we transmit our results to the home page, right? Because that's on the internet. The rest of this process is not, right? And there's a verifiable paper trail, right? Because the paper ballot's the official thing.
Wait, you missed me. So there's a, okay. So when the ballots come in, when the voting machines come in, and again, we'll have to talk more about this because I really want to hear it in detail. But when they come in, everything's handled offline. Like that whole process of counting and tabulating and everything, that's all air gapped. And then there is one point when you're like, all right, this stick has the information.
We move from the air gapped room with a stick, right? That never goes back into that air gapped room, right? It goes one way and it's got to go on the internet for people to see the results.
Sure.
Right.
That's how we get the like refresh results.
Yeah.
Okay.
When everyone's looking like, what are these results? Right. You got that via the internet. Right. So we at some point have to plug those results in. There is a slim probability chance that if someone wanted to, China or Russia, intercept that and somehow manipulate it. But there's so many people looking at that, right?
Right. So like if they manipulated it, you would be able to verify on your end. You're like, no, hang on. That was 20,000 and now it reads 18,000. Hey, that's wrong. So you would be able to just through a very rudimentary human check, like, hey, these are our numbers printed out on this piece of paper here in this room, right next to the air gap room. And we're never going back in there. But like what got reported up there is inaccurate. So even if people are like, hey, we can change these votes, there's no way for them to stop you from in your one room that has internet connectivity. There's no way for them to stop you from saying, hey, these are the results on our end. And those are the results being reported. That's not accurate.
And that's what we do. We have several people sitting in that room. We plug that in. Before we post it to the world, we look at it and go, did this match what was in the other room?
Right, the air gapped room.
Yes.
So in the air gapped room, you have a guy being like, it's 20. And you're like, okay, it's 20.
That's correct.
Everything's good. Fire her up and shoot the 20 to, Secretary of State.
Secretary of State, right?
Great.
So somewhere in there, could there be manipulation? Yeah, there could be a cyber attack or whatever on the results, right? But they don't get anywhere near the votes.
On the results as they're transmitted.
As they're transmitted. Or they're eventually posted, right? So someone could actually take the actual results. They could use some sort of AI and change things around and send out misinformation, right? But at the end of the day, we're checking those results and we'll have official results up. So if you're getting your information from somewhere other than the official source, you probably ought to check the official source.
And again, I think there needs to be a distinction made here. When you're saying results, you're saying, look, we have the actual results of the vote in a hard copy right here.
Yeah.
And when we broadcast or transmit those results, they're like, say China's like, okay, let's take the 20,000 and put it down to 17,000 and take that 3,000 delta and put it over here.
Yeah.
You guys have the actual results, and the broadcast results then get manipulated, but you're sitting here making sure, hey, we said 20,000. Is 20,000 appearing on that screen on the Secretary of State's website?
Yes.
And if the answer is no, you're like, okay, the broadcasted results that transferred from this room to that room, those are not accurate. Fix that right now, because the actual results never change. The actual results from your tabulation room, the whole thing, it's like, look, these are not changing. And like, I don't care if I have to call them 100 times tonight. I'm going to make sure that the numbers that pop up on that Secretary of State screen are exactly the numbers from this building. And these numbers, it's impossible to change these numbers. Like, no matter how big the computer is, China's not going to be able to change the actual votes, the actual machines, like all that stuff. That's all air gapped. There's no way, unless they physically come down and break in and blah. And even with that, you have checks and balances.
Yes. And that's why we have the canvas period as well, right? We're programmed as Americans to get results the next day, but none of those votes are certified and actual until the canvas period, which is 10 days later, right? That gives everyone the opportunity to check and make sure that the process was followed properly, right? We go back the next day and go, did anything change? Did we miss something, right? There's a possibility, humans are involved with this process, that someone might have gone, oh, you know what? We actually didn't get that actual batch scanned properly, and we're checking all of that stuff. We're having people doing multiple QA checks throughout this whole process. That gives us a chance in the day or the next day to be able to go, yes, we validated this. We did it properly. What's posted on the internet is correct. We're good. We're checking with the Secretary of State. And then after a period of time, the Secretary of State, they do checks as well, right? They've got a whole cybersecurity team that's monitoring everything on election day. They're aware of hacks. They're aware of attempts. They're responding to those things. They got CISA people. They got FBI people. They're all monitoring all this stuff on our traffic, right? And if something comes up, we've got 10 days to figure it out to make sure that when we certify the results of election, they actually reflect the will of the voter, and your vote, again, is respected.
Man, this is wild stuff. This is like cloak and dagger stuff, I feel like. But again, just, I had this conversation with a buddy of mine who's very concerned about election integrity. And he very frequently talks about other states. Mm-hmm. And I keep reminding him, like, listen, I don't know what's going on in other states. I'm absolutely not saying they're good or bad. What I'm saying is these elections in Idaho right here are great. And one question he had is like, hey, how do the results get from like Ada County to the Secretary of State? And I actually didn't know. I'm like, well, they don't drive them. That doesn't make sense. Like, they would have to transmit it, because I was telling him it was air gapped. And in that transmission, I'm like, well, I guess there is some opportunity for manipulation, but just the most rudimentary, like, hey, we sent them 20,000, they're reading 18,000. Call Phil McGrain and tell him it's 20,000. That's so basic. Like, when's the last time, or has it ever happened that, at least in your knowledge, that Ada County has had to be like, hey, we transmitted you 20,000 and you're reading 18,000? Like, is that something that has happened?
Never happened.
So wait, the dude who was like, hey, I know that 8% of the votes from these counties got manipulated, sent to China, manipulated and sent back. That's like, that has never happened.
It's never happened.
Wow, man. God bless.
What's funny is I've heard that same story. What's funny is there's 6 counties that hand count, right? And so what they do is they hand count, because they have such small numbers of ballots, 300 to 1,000 ballots, right? They can actually hand count. It's probably even cheaper for them to do that. They hand count, and then they manually put those results in, right? So I don't know how any of that could have been intercepted other than after the fact, right? But again, we're checking those multiple times to make sure that what we put in the system was actually what was reported. So there's really no way. These folks like China, Iran, Russia, they are super smart, right? And I say that tongue in cheek, right? Well, I should say they're not dumb.
Okay.
Right? They know in order to manipulate elections, they're going to manipulate people, right? Because the trail of the forensic computer trail of trying to hack in and do something, we're always going to find that. We've got people good enough in the United States that know, hey, something got manipulated here and it's not correct data. What they're trying to do is they're trying to manipulate the front end by manipulating your thoughts and your behavior, right? So they're going to push stuff out on how you consume your information. And they're going to try to get you to lean one way or another. They're going to throw these weird things. That's why people are freaking out about AI, right? These deep fakes and other things that people from other countries create to get you to think a certain way and show up at the ballot box and vote a certain way based off fears or something else, right?
Right. It seems a lot easier to manipulate a Facebook group than it would be
Yes.
to get into your
Hack
black box
into
room.
our room and change the results. So that's what they're doing. They're not attempting to like change the actual results by hacking into a system.
Man, it's wild times. Trent, listen, I know it's a working day for you. Do you have anything we've missed about ballot verifier? Oh, by the way, could you pull up one of those ballots real fast?
Yeah.
I was having a conversation with somebody the other day about hand counting, and the idea was like, hey, look, if you gave me a bunch of ballots, I could count like A or B really fast. Like we should just hand count these things. And what I said was like, okay, that may be true if you had just like one decision, but like on a standard general ballot, and was this the primary?
Yeah, this was the primary.
So on a general ballot, how many decisions do people have to make? Like say in Ada County, what would the most actual decisions be?
So you got to realize it gets aggregated, right? So every precinct is going to have a different ballot. So when we come in and we start hand counting those ballots, there's hundreds of races. While you may only vote in 20 or 30, us compiling them or tabulating them, we're tabulating hundreds of different contests across the thing.
Even like precinct committeemen.
Right.
Right.
So
like how many precincts do we have?
you look at your ballot and you go, that shouldn't be that hard to hand tabulate. Well, yeah, your ballot may not be hard to hand tabulate, but I've got over 1,000 different ballot styles with hundreds of different races on them, right? And then making sure that those results in precinct level, in office level, in legislative district level, all those get tabulated properly by hand. I'm sorry. You're going to need a lot of really smart people with a lot of QA and a lot of time to make sure that you get that accurately. It would be like making someone at a bank hand count every penny and dollar bill that comes in.
But even in a general election, even if you only had one precinct, you're like, hey, look, you might only vote on 20 or 30 races. That's literally one page with 30 different marks I have to make to track. And so it's not like, hey, you have to, because you have roughly like what, 240,000 people vote in Ada County. Great. So it's not that I have to calculate 240,000 different decisions. You're actually calculating, what is that? 72 million? Or is that seven?
Don't ask me to do math. That's
no, 7.2 million. 30 times 240,000. So you're actually calculating 7.2 million decisions, not 240,000. That's a lot of decisions. And to hand count those with accuracy would be just an astronomical feat, right? Because you're not saying like, okay, like, did the person say Trent or Matt? Like, which is it? It's like, yeah, but you got to do Trent or Matt 30 times each ballot that comes in.
Right. We had a guy that came in that kept challenging on this, saying, hey, you guys need to go to hand count. You need to go to hand count. And I'm like, look, all right, come on in. Let's walk through this. Let's actually take the amount of ballots and we'll show you the process that we have to go through, because it's not just one person, it's 4 people, 2 calling out, 2 recording. We compare those 2 different recordings. We compare the 2 different call outs. That whole process to just get one vote, right, accurately counted and tabulated is a process, and it takes time, right? So we walked them through that. And then I said, okay, now tell me how many people I'm going to need and how long this is going to take. And he did it. He calculated it all, and it changed his mind. He had been out there screaming bloody murder that we needed a hand count every single ballot in Ada County. And after that, he goes, there's no way we're going to do this. And on top of that, we're probably going to make mistakes, because I showed him the process that we go through, and he goes, there's a possibility, right, that we're going to mess that up. And I go, yeah. And we generally do when we do recounts. And recounts, we actually hand count a select portion of it before we run it through the machines again. And if those two match within a tolerance level, then we'll do it all machine count, right? But the mistakes are always made on the hand counting side, not on the machine side.
So if you have some ballot, you're like, okay, this one is not matching. This hand count didn't match with the computer count, and you pull them up and you're like, okay, the computer was right. Like if we're doing a very clear review, the computer was right, the person was wrong. That's where the mistake is.
Yes, it always is.
Gosh, man, that's wild.
So if you extrapolate that over 240,000 ballots, right?
Yeah, we just have it's like self-driving, right? Like I read this great article probably 4 or 5 years ago from Musk when he was like, listen, there's going to come a point when we have to make a decision about how many crashes we want because we want humans driving, right? And it's going to come down to that, like overwhelmingly the computers, and he wasn't saying it was necessarily at this point, and he had created millions and millions of miles and hours of driving. He was like, look, we're already safer. Cars are already safer. And of course, like you have situations where like a goose flies in front of your car and it's like, what do you do?
Sure.
Right? So you have problems like that. But there is a point when we're going to have to tolerate like, okay, we want this level of error because I want to say it was human counted, but I'm going to accept a higher degree of probability that there are errors or a higher level of errors just to have the value of like, it was hand counted.
The best solutions, you've seen this over and over again, there's 1,000 different applications for it, is you have technology-assisted decisions by humans, right? I don't ever want to turn this over to computers to go, you figure this out and tell us what the results are.
Sure.
Right? We always have human oversight. We're always checking it. We're always double checking it, triple checking it to make sure that what's happening with the computers is actually what should be happening, right? We never turn this over, and just let, technology run and do whatever they want with it, right? It's always controlled by humans, and it always will be for elections, because that's how we maintain that trust. If I was turning this all over to computers to just figure out, develop ballots, get them out, do all this other stuff, there's a possibility that could screw up. And if we're not watching it, we have to be careful. Machines aren't 100%, right? But machines help us do things much more efficiently and much more accurately. We just need to be making sure that we're checking to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. And we get it. Now, at some future point, if the masses go, you know what, we don't want to use computers anymore in elections, I say, okay, fine.
It's just going to cost this much. And
you're going to get results much later than what you think you're going to get.
Right.
Right.
Right. Like, we can do it.
Yeah.
We can do it. You just have to change your expectation for the world.
Right.
We could also get around without cars.
Yeah.
You just have to change your expectation of, of
how long it's going to take to get somewhere.
Right. And there's a lot of horse poo involved in that.
That's right.
Anyway, Trent, thank you for coming today. I appreciate you, sir. I'd love to do another episode if you have time about chain of custody for votes prior to the election. Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
MTU Studios is the proud producer for the Ada County Sheriff Podcast, the Idaho Wildlife Federation Podcast, the State Representative Ted Hill Podcast, the Idaho State PTA Podcast, and many more. If you or your organization is thinking about starting a podcast, MTU Studios would love to help. Just check out mtustudios.com.